Good afternoon and welcome back to our tutorial on how to create an object in Maya and bring it into the Unreal Engine. So previous video we went ahead and created this heart and we set up the color so that we have the parameters so they, it's all shiny and pretty. And of course I can hit the play button and it does have some collision. Now I can't pick it up just yet, so what we're going to do is actually make it so that we can pick up our object, or at the very least when we touch our object that it disappears. And that's pretty simple. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape here, and I'm going to create a new folder. So on my content I'll right click and I'll create new folder. I'm going to call this blueprints, and inside my blueprints folder I'm going to create an items folder. So it's always good to organize your stuff. Inside my items folder, I will then create my first blueprint. So we're going to right click and go up to blueprint class. And we have a whole bunch of classes to choose from. You have actor, pawn, character, and so on and so forth. They all depend on what you're trying to make. If you're not going to control it in any sort of way, a basic actor is just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and create an actor. And I'm going to call this heart underscore BP. That way, that's my heart blueprint. Go ahead and double click on that. It's going to bring up our blueprint window. This pops up different for everybody. Sometimes you have the event graph, sometimes you have the construction graph or construction script, and other times it has this collapsed into a text-based window. But for us, we just want to be in the viewport here. And when we first open this, we have this little window, and we have our default scene root. This is always there, but we don't need this. We can actually set our object to the default root. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize my window, and I can go over to my meshes. And while I'm here, just to be OCD, because I have my mesh here, I'm going to make a materials folder. Right click on content, materials, just to organize stuff. I'll go to my meshes and I'll move all my materials to materials. Hit move. There we go. So here's my heart, and I'm going to drag this right here into my scene. Fancy, fancy. Up here to our left, you see under components where it says our heart and the default scene root. We're going to make our heart the root, so I'm going to drag that up to the root. Just drop it there. So it'll delete the root off, and this is our root now. So what's kind of cool about a blueprint is this makes the object interactive. It's no longer just a static mesh in the scene. I can give it some code. I can say, tell it what to do or how to interact with other elements in the game. So now what I do with this is I want to create a collision boundary that represents where the player can touch this object. To do that, I'll go up to where it says add component, hit the drop down. I'm going to type in collision. And we have a few options. You have a box, a capsule, or a sphere. You could also create your own custom collision. But for this example, we just need a basic one, so I'll do a basic box. And there it is. But this is way too big for our object. You can see it's huge, right? Our player could be 10 feet away from this thing and it wouldn't matter. So I'm going to select this thing. I'm going to move it up. I want to change its size. To do that, I'll hit spacebar. And until I get to my little widget here. And I'll just scale this in one direction. So I'm grabbing the Y scale there. You do want this to be bigger, just a tad bit bigger than the object. I'm going to go this way. And if you find that the snapping is too much, you can come up to where the grid snaps are. You can actually turn those off, or you can adjust your snapping to a better value. I'm going to go down to 1. I'll just snap this down. And I actually hit the wrong snap. I hit grid snap, not scale snap. So go back. I'll put grid back to normal. You want scale snap here. There we go. Scale to the grid. I'll set that to... Whoops. There we go. A little tighter. That way, no matter where we hit, we're always going to get this. So I want to go to my event graph. So I'm going to go up to event graph here. And we have a few things that we can kind of play with. I want to tell the blueprint that whenever we touch the collision boundary, that we want it to destroy itself. We want the object to disappear. And that's pretty simple. Go ahead and drag off from our event actor begin overlap. If you read this here, it talks about collision boundaries and if it's been intersected by something. So that's what we want. Go ahead and drag that off. If you don't see this, depending on what version of Unreal you have, you might have to create one. You can just right click and then type it in here. It's called so on actor begin overlap. You can see you can assign it or create one or use the event up here. Okay, so if you don't have it, that's where you would get it. But we have one, so I'm not going to make one. I'm going to drag off the little play wire here. And all I want this to do is destroy itself. So I'll say destroy. And under my utilities, I'm going to choose destroy actor, because our object is an actor. And that's it. I'll hit compile. Save. And I'm going to delete this one. Actually, just so you can see the difference, I'll leave this one here. And then I'll go to my blueprints, items, and I'll drag in the new one that I made, just so you can see them. And you can see that the static mesh I can't do anything with, but if I walk over to the other one, boop, it disappears. Kind of cool, right? Alright. But there is a bit of an issue, and you probably won't notice the issue unless you do this. So we're going to go back into our blueprint. And I'm going to drag off a wire from my event begin play. And I type in simulate physics. So when you do that, you'll have a few options. It's going to ask you, do you want the collision box to simulate or do you want the object to simulate? We want the object to simulate. The collision box should follow the object. So make sure you grab your SM heart object. And that'll drop in our simulate physics box with a reference to our heart. And I'm going to check the simulate physics. Compile. And what this will do is, let's say if I pick this up and I play, you'll see it drops and it falls and it responds to physics and gravity and that sort of thing. I'm going to put a few of these in here right in front of the player just so we can see it. So here's this one. I'll hold down the Alt key and drag off another one, turn it a little bit. And what we're going to see here is that these things can actually destroy each other. If they hit play, well, my character's in the way. I'll move them just off so I can see what we're doing here. Select them both, move them. And I'll actually give this one enough height so we can see it fall. Boop. And you can see that. So when it hit, both actors destroyed each other because the collision is just checking to see if there's an overlap with the actor against another actor's boundary box. And in this case, the answer was yes, so they both got destroyed. So what I want to do is I want to tell this thing that if it hits an actor, that the only actor we care about is the player. So I'm going to drag off my destroy actor. I'm actually going to make some space here for my physics because we're going to use this for the hover. Move my event tick out of the way. And we want to get a reference to our player character. So I'm going to drag off the play wire. And if you had a character, you would just look for his blueprint. So in our case, we're going to look for the third person character blueprint. So I'm going to type in third And you can see we have a few options in our list here. We have cast to, and we can cast to the animation, we can cast the class of the character, all the things that represent the character, but we actually just want the blueprint of the character. In this case, that is we want cast to third person character by itself. That's all it says, third person character. I'll grab that. We have this other actor output. I'm going to drag that to object. And that's going to tell it that, hey, if I collide with something and it is the player, then I'll destroy myself. Otherwise, it's just going to ignore the function call. So I'll go ahead and hit compile, save it, and now when I play, bink, they hit each other, and they just fall. So now what I want to do is set this up so it'll actually give me some health. So to do that, I need to tell the player that he has health, because he doesn't have any right now. I'm going to go down to where it says third person BP. This is where the default, if you load the default character, it has a third person blueprint already made. So we'll go into third person BP, go to the BP or blueprint options that are there, and just choose the third person. And we end up popping in, and depending on where you end up, you might end up here with the character or in the construction script. We're actually in the event graph. And it doesn't really matter where you go. This is our input. I'm going to go over to some blank space, kind of click, press the C key. That'll bring up a comment box. I'm going to call this player health. Align this nice and beautiful. And we need to create some variables. So all a variable is a container for information. It's just a box that holds whatever value we're going to give it. So over to our left here, we have variables. I'm going to click variable. And I'm going to call this variable player health. And you can see right next to player health, there's a little, looks like a squiggly line. This is actually an eyeball. If I poke it, I'll open the eye. This makes this variable public so that it is visible anywhere else in the game. That way, if we have to tell something else to talk to that value, we have access to it. If it's something that nobody else should be able to have access to outside of this player, then we would just poke it in the eye, and we would no longer see that variable anywhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and poke it, make sure I can see it. And then over to my Details tab, I want to make sure that I have the correct variable type because there are several different ones to do different things. I want to make sure that I have one for numbers, so I'm going to grab, you have integer and float. Integers are just whole numbers, floats are anything with a decimal place. I'm going to go ahead and hit integer, and you'll see it changes to blue, and you can see this one over here also changes to blue. I'm going to make another one of these. I'll hit the little plus sign. And you can see it remembers the last one we used, so the last one we did use was an integer right there. I'm going to call this one player max health. And these are going to represent how much the health the player can have and then how much the health the player currently has. And all I want to do right now is tell the game, hey, when we start, the player should have a certain amount of health. So before I can use these variables, let me poke that one in the eye too, get them both open. Before I can use my variables, I have to compile, and then I'll select my player max health. Over in my details value to the right, I'm going to set the max health to 10. I'm going to grab my player max health, drag that out into the world, and I'm going to say get. So a get allows you to look at what's there. A set allows you to change the value. So we're going to say get. I just want to look at the value. And we're going to tell the game when it starts to just give this to this one. So I'm going to drag this one in. I'm going to say set. So I'm going to plug in the max health to the player health. So when the game starts, this one's going to get the value, but I have to tell it to do it when it starts. So to do that, we have these two little player wires. This is the input, this is the output. I'm going to take the input wire, and I'm going to say event begin, and you have event begin play. So this is when the game starts. So when the game starts, first thing it's going to do is it's going to set this variable so that we have health. I'm going to go ahead and hit compile. I'm going to minimize that. But we won't see our health in game. If I hit play, you won't see it. And the reason for that is we need to set up the health meter for our character. To do that, go ahead and stop that. I'm going to go to my blueprints folder. Remember, there are 2 blueprints folders. There's one inside the third person, and there's one that we created. I'm going to go to the one that we created. I'm going to right click in here. I'm going to create a new blueprint class. And you don't see it in the list, but if you go down to where it says all classes, we want to create a HUD class. We're going to say HUD. So a HUD is just a heads up display. It's just going to throw something to the screen. I'm going to choose the basic HUD. Select that. I'm going to call this, for the sake of this argument, I'll call it my HUD. And I also need a HUD widget, so I'm going to right click. I'm going to go down to user interface, and then we have a widget blueprint. I'm going to call this my HUD widget. My HUD widget. So now I want to double click on my widget. So go ahead and double click. And in here you can see this little outline. This is the area that your screen is, and it's actually set. You can see my screen set to 1280 by 720. So anything outside of here is outside those bounds. You can always increase or decrease depending on the size of your scale screen settings. But all I need right here is a progress bar. So in our left here, I'm going to drag in a progress bar. You can always load in your custom items if you wanted to, but there's the progress bar. I'll go ahead and drag this out, make it look like a health bar. And I'm going to name my progress bar. Over in the details, let's go ahead and name it health bar. Health bar. And you can see when we name it, it appears over here as health bar. And what I want to do is I want to assign this the value of my health so we can actually see it. If I come over to where we have progress, you see percent. If I drag this, you can see it fills and it decreases. Right next to that, we have the word bind. And what bind does, it allows us to talk to the code to get access to our variables. So let's go ahead and hit bind and create binding. The window is going to change. It's going to drop us into our graph here. If you ever get lost, design view takes you back to your window. Graph takes you back to the code. Okay. Going to center up. And we now have under functions a get health bar percent. And there it is, get health bar percent, and then output. And we need to tell this to look at the player's health. So drag this out. I'm going to come off this play wire. And I want to get the player character, so third person character. So we're cast a third person character. That'll get access to him. And we need to actually reference the object this time. So I'm going to drag off the wire from object. And I'm just going to tell it to get the player character. So get player character. There we go. So this comes through and says, hey, where's my health bar? It's over here. Okay. Well, we're looking for the player character. Where is it at? Well, that's here. That's all it's doing. Now we need access to the variables. To get access to the player's variables, we need to actually drag off of the third person character output. This little blue thing. I'll pull this off. And I'm going to get my player health. So I'll say player health. And you see we have a few options here. We have our player health and our player max health. I want my player health, so get player health. It'll drop that in. And I'm going to plug this right into our value here. But you can actually see that they're two different colors. This one is sort of like a teal or a turquoise. This one's green. This turquoise color means that this is an integer. The green means it is a float. And you can actually see if I hover, it says type float. This one is type integer. If I plug this in, it's going to convert it. But the problem is a percentage is actually a decimal value. So I can't just plug an integer into a float because it'll read it as 100% and then we won't actually see anything. So if I plug this in to there, it'll do the conversion for us. I'll hit compile. But we're going to have to actually change this. Let's go ahead and minimize. To see this on the screen, we're going to go to our HUD. So go to My HUD Blueprint. Go to the event graph. And then the moment we begin the game, so on event begin play, event begin play, we need to create widget. So create widget. It wants to know what type of widget class we're creating. Well, we want to create our widget class. So I'm going to use my HUD widget. And then we want to cast that to the screen. So I'm going to just go out here and say add to viewport. So down here, add to viewport. And we do need to hook up this target value. It wants to know where it's going. So there we go. We'll compile this. We'll go ahead and minimize. And before we can actually see it, we need to set this into our properties. So let's go up to Edit, Project Settings. In the Project Settings window, we're going to go down where it says Project, come down to Maps and Modes. And then in Maps and Modes, we have our default game mode. Currently it's set to the third-person character. I'm going to hit the drop down, and you can see where it says HUD class. We're going to actually choose our HUD class. I'm going to choose my HUD. That way we'll see our HUD result. I'll go ahead and close that. Don't forget to save, because Unreal likes to crash. If we play now, you can see our HUD now displays on the screen, but you can see it's full, right? It's 100%. We don't want it to do that. We want a percentage of the health. So I'm going to go in to my widget here, open up the widget again, and we are of course in the graph. I want to make sure that this is going to convert our value correctly. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab this little converter, bring this over here. I'm going to drag off a wire from the float point here, and I'm going to type in a divide. So this is a little /. And we're going to take a float divided by float. I'm going to plug the float value output into my return. So now it's going to convert our health into a float, and it's going to be a value of 10, right? So if we want this to be scaled appropriately, we need to divide our health by 100. So I'm going to go here, type in the value of 100. And there's my health. So if I divide 10 by 100, I'll get 0.1. And that'll be my percent. So that means my health will be 10%. I can go ahead and hit compile. And then I'll go ahead and play. And now you'll see there's my health. It's filled to about 10%. So now what we want to do is we want to tell our object, our little item here, that whenever we touch it, to give us some health. So I'm going to come down to items, make sure we're in our blueprints, go to items. I'm going to open up my heart blueprint. And in here, I want to tell this that when we touch the player, but before we destroy ourselves, we want to assign some health. So I'm going to drag off a wire from third-person character. And this time I want to set player health. So I'll set the health. I'm going to drag this play wire, plug that in, plug this into there. And then for here where it says the amount, where it says player health, I'm going to drag off a wire from player health, and I'm going to type in a plus symbol, and you're going to see integer plus integer. So I'm going to add this integer to there. So how much are we going to add? Well, that's kind of up to you. You could just type in the value to add, but I actually want to assign the heart value, the heart its own value. So I'm going to come over to variables. I'll add a variable. I'll call this, I don't know, heart value. Change our type to integer. We'll have to compile before we can get all the stuff, so compile, and then set the heart value to however much health you want to give it. So in my case, I'm just going to do 10. So now I'm going to drag out the heart value. I'm going to use a get, so I want to get the heart value. And I'm actually going to plug the heart value into the bottom here. It doesn't really matter. Adding to adding is the same. So heart value is going to be there. But then for the top value here, I actually need to tell it to check the current value of our health before adding to it. If I just tell it to add, it's always going to be 10, no matter what I do. So I'm going to drag off from player character, and I'm going to type in get player health. So I'm going to get the current player health, plug that in. So the way it's going to work is once we get the overlap, we get the confirmation that we've been touched, we're going to check the player. It's going to filter in and go, hey, we need to set this value. So what's it going to do? It's going to come out, see what the current value is, add the new value to it, and then set it. After that, the object will destroy itself, and everything will be grand in the world. So go ahead and hit compile. Make sure we save. And now if I play, I'll go ahead and pick up a heart. Dink. And you can see my amount of health has increased. So now I can get health, and everything is right in the world. One last thing, just so you know, because we didn't tell it to cap the health, we could actually continue to overflow the health more than we need. Just so you can kind of see that. Boop. I'm going to make a few of these just so you can see me overflow the health. Go on the Congo line, just grab them all. Doot, 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 doot. Now it doesn't look like anything bad is happening. But we're actually going to look at some text for the health. So I'm going to go in to my blueprint and my HUD widget. So in here, I'm actually going to go to my design view. I'm going to add a text. That way you can see exactly how much health you have. So text. And you can put this here or you can put this in the box. It's up to you. You are the designer. I'm going to put it on top. And then from here, I'm going to call this health text. And in the text value where it says content, we have text. I'm going to go to bind and then create binding. Just like we did before, we're going to get access to the player. So I'm going to drag off a wire. We're going to get the third person character. Or your character, whatever your character's name is. We need the object of the character. So this is going to be get player character. Get player character. We also want to get the player's health, so get player health. And plug that in. You can see we have a pink and a green or a teal. That's fine. If we plug it in, it'll convert it to a text conversion. This one doesn't need any fancy math. It should just work. We'll hit compile and save. And here we go. We have, now we can see how much health we have enumerated, so we can go ahead and pick this. So doot. So here I am at 100, but I can go to 110, right? So I can actually overfill the amount of health that is available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cap my health. So I'm going to come into the player, so go back to the player blueprint. That's actually down under third person, and then third person blueprint character. In my event graph, we have set our health when we start. And then I'm going to actually come down and have a condition that checks how much health we have. The first part is actually going to check to see if we have no health. And then if you had no health, you could actually set up like a dead event, like for your character to die. And if you have too much health, it'll just stop filling. So what we need to do is set up an event tick. So we're going to come in here, we're going to say event tick. You could set up a custom event to do this as well. We'll just use event tick for now. From event tick, I'm going to drag off a wire, and I want a branch. So what a branch is basically a condition that says if the condition is true, then we have what we do if it's true, or what we do if it's not true. And we're going to tell the condition to check the current amount of health. So the first part is to check player health. So drag in player health. We want to get the health. And we're going to check to see if the player health is greater than or less than 0. So I'm going to go ahead and drag off the wire. I'm just going to type in less than. And we want to make sure that we are less than or equal to, because you could be 0 and still be alive. So we want to make sure that you're 0 or below. So less than or equal to. In this case, we just want to check to see if it's compared to 0. If we are less than or equal to 0, we're going to plug this condition in. And if that's true, then we're going to set the player health. So set player health to 0. This will make sure we can't ever go below 0. And then the next part is to make sure we don't go above our max health. So I'm going to drag off false. So in the event that our health, of course, is greater than 0, we'll drag off false. I'll grab another branch. And this time we're going to say if our health is greater than the max health, then it's going to be the max health. So let's drag in player max health. We're going to get it. I'm also going to copy my player health. You could use the same one, but just to keep everything clean, I'm just going to copy it. So Control W. And we want to compare these two. So I'm going to drag off a wire and say greater than or equal to. So if the player health is greater than or equal to our max health, plug that in to condition. So if our health is greater than the max health, then we're going to set a new value. So we're going to go ahead and Control W, select the player health there. And we're going to set the player health. And we could just set it equal to the max health. You can make a new one or use the same one. I'm just going to go ahead and drag off a wire, plug it in. And if the wire crossing drives you nuts, you can double click on the middle of the wire and create a reroute node. So this just says if our health is greater than our max health, it's going to be set to the max health value, which is currently 100. Okay, compile. We'll play. And you can see as I'm grabbing, my health is not changing. You might be wondering why. This is why. So we'll go in, go back to our player. We actually forgot to change our setup here. So we currently have our player health set to a max health of 10. See that? So let's go ahead and change our max health to 100. And then instead of having this thing check the max health, we're going to actually set it to a lower value. So I'm going to just go ahead and break this wire. So right click on the wire, say break. And I'll just start at 10. I'll just type in 10 there. You could create a new variable called player starting health and then have that in there or whatever. But this is fine. I'm just going to break that, hit compile. So here we are. and I will go ahead and grab. You can see that these are filling, but I can't go over the health. See that? I grabbed an extra one and I couldn't overfill. Now this is an option. If you wanted a situation to where you couldn't, let's say you had a health potion or you saw a health piece and you didn't want to waste it, because if we grab a health and we don't gain anything from it, it's essentially a waste. So you could set it up in your object. If I come down to items, my blueprint for my item here, you could actually have this thing check that if it can't give you the full amount, then it won't give it to you. So you could set up a branch here. So we'll say branch. So what we'll do here is we'll actually compare to see if the player's health is full. So let's go ahead and grab the player health. We'll do Control W. And we're actually going to plug, we have to make sure we plug this back into the target. So plug that in. Again, I'll use a reroute node just to kind of tidy this up. Where are you? And I also want to compare it to the max health again. So I'm going to drag off another wire. Actually, I'll drag it off the reroute node. Drag off the reroute. We'll say get player max health. And what this will do is we'll just check to make sure that our health is not greater than the max health. So drag this off. And then what we want to do is we want to type in less than. And I'll go ahead and grab the less than integer. We don't want a less than or equal to. So if it is less than the player health, or if our player health is less than our max health, we can always get new health or get more health. But if our player health is ever equal to the max health, then we don't want to get more health. So we're going to make sure we get just a less than. And we're plug in our max health. So if our player health is less than the max health, then it's okay for the object to destroy itself. If not, then it won't do anything. We do want to switch these branches though. We don't want to set the health before we check it. So we're going to actually break this one. So break connections here. I'll move this over. So this one is going to go to the branch. And then this one, this true, is going to go to the set. And our set is going to go to the destroy. So hopefully that doesn't mess you up too badly. We're just checking this condition first. So I'm just going to reroute these to save your brain. You guys go here. You guys go here. Plug those back in. Alright, so hopefully this helps ease some of the wire crossing. So we're checking that branch first. So the branch is going to check to see if the health is okay. And if it's true, then we will do this part. We'll set it and then forget it. Okay. We'll hit compile. And now we will jump back in the game and test. So if I compile here, or play the game, I should be able to pick up health. I can indeed. I now have 100%, and I should not be able to grab this last one. Nope. All I can do is kick it. Alright, so a little bit longer of a video than I was hoping, but hopefully this has been educational for you. If you like the video, of course, click the like button or subscribe. And in the next video, we'll show you how to set up the heart so that it can like hover or spin or do other little effects to kind of make it pretty in the level. And I will see you guys in the next video.